I know that budgeting doesn't bring people to warm and fuzzy feelings. In fact, it might just make you feel a lot of other feelings. That used to be me. I was in debt, lots of it, because I went to a pretty expensive school, and out of school, even though I had a decent job, thankfully, I was not intentional about my spending. So budgeting just felt like an annoying, frustrating chore, and sometimes it even felt pretty pointless. But it got to a point where I needed to really change all of that. The way I was managing my personal finances, I realized had a negative impact on my stress levels. And it was affecting the way I viewed myself and how I treated other people. So instead of just completely giving up on budgeting, I decided to give it another try. But this time, I viewed it as a design problem. Really sat down, reassessed everything, and redesigned my budget completely. And when I did, it seriously changed my life. By budgeting, I was able to pay off my student loans. My wife and I bankrolled a New York City wedding, funded a career transition into design, and we were able to stay home a little bit longer with our 2 young boys. All the while, we managed to still take our vacations, go see family, and attend friends' weddings. And we stayed debt-free all the way through. Best of all, over time, I developed a healthy, low-stress, overall just joyful relationship with money. So today, I'm gonna lay bare my budget to you and show you exactly what I did. So it turns out that there's one major thing that I do when it comes to my personal finances, and it's the consistent key across all the different milestones that I just mentioned. And here it is. So here are my major budget categories. Most are pretty normal, what you'd expect, but at the top, I have a category called emotionally healthy investments. And before I think about rent, utilities, and even food, and definitely before the fun stuff I want to have or experience, I fill up this category. This category has very little to do with saving up for things that I want to have and consume, but it has everything to do with how I want to think, feel, and be. I know right now I may be losing you. This may sound a little too philosophical, but give me a moment. Let me take an example from the design world to kind of ground what I'm trying to say. So in the design of everyday things, it doesn't just encompass making a task easy to do, but there's a whole lot of emphasis around how does that task actually make someone feel. That's why buttons have that satisfying click sound and your computer has that loading screen. But consider for a moment if someone didn't think hard about those things. So I think the same can be applied to your personal finances. I mean, you work hard for your money, so I think you deserve everything that your money can buy. And your kids for sure deserve that too. But just consider for a moment if it's worth the stress on your mental health, your relational health, your spiritual health, thinking a little bit more holistically. At least my wife and I found it really helpful. So we sat down, really thought hard about how do we want to think, feel, and be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and then design our budget to work towards that. Okay, so quick disclaimer. I know that finances and budgeting can be a very personal thing. So my goal here isn't to be prescriptive about exactly how you should do it. I think you should tailor it to exactly your needs. But what I am doing is offering up a framework of how I think about it and how I do it, like literally how I do it. And I'm going to show you right now. So let's get into it. The first budget item in emotionally healthy investments is money I can give. It includes tithes to my local church, recurring gifts to charities and individuals we support. We also have a benevolence fund that we slowly build up in case there is any one-time help we can provide to people and causes we care about. There's also gifts for birthdays, holidays, and stuff like that. We know that that's going to happen, so we want to think about that. And this is all about spiritual health and relational health. Thinking about these things up front has been such a great practice for me because too often when I used to put it at the end of my budget, I realized I couldn't do these things consistently and abundantly. And admittedly, I've used my credit card more than I should have trying to get birthday gifts and doing holiday shopping, which is never a great idea. Not only that, When there were people and causes that I really cared about and wanted to support, sometimes I just didn't have the leftover money to give. And oftentimes they don't take credit card. No bueno. Number 2 on the list, get out of debt fund. I was thousands deep in credit card debt before. I've also had student loans, lots of it. But I've also studied finance in college and have worked in the finance industry. And after all that, my conclusion about debt, most debt is bad. And the rest can be dangerous because debt preys on people's human nature to want things now and worry about it later. And left unchecked or mismanaged, that can compound exponentially, while your income likely doesn't grow like that. So you can find yourself in a tough spot for 10, 15, 30 years, maybe even forever. Let's just say that I know people, close people, who have filed for personal bankruptcy before, and it's seriously a tough and messy situation. But having that said, I think that still could be good. It can be a good way to invest if you do it right, and it can also be a helpful lifeline during an emergency situation. But otherwise, it's probably best you get out of debt. There's probably a lot more that I could say here about debt, but it's really not the point of this video. So we'll just move on. I love this category. So number 3 on the list is creative safety zone. And this budget item was the answer to a very important question that I had when I was thinking about transitioning into design. And that question, how can you actually stay creative and do work that you believe is good if you have to worry about money? And then I heard this talk from one of my favorite illustrators.
But how can you focus on your work when you actually have to be worried about money? And I've been there, and this is the worst of it all, of them all. And I think the only solution there is to really kind of like create a safety zone where you can focus on your work without having to think about money. And this is it's very difficult. For me, my solution is like, I try to think of what's my kind of like every month expense, which is surprisingly steady. And then I try to multiply it by 6 and always try to have that number in the account. So I know if something goes wrong, whether it's health or work, I can always focus on that thing and then worry about the money a little bit later. And this actually has a real impact on my creativity, I realized. Because it means I never have to take on a job that I don't believe in. Because I feel I have a week to wait for something else to happen. And maybe even more importantly, I always feel, if I want to, I can walk away from any job. And I think I've done this maybe like twice in 15 years. But knowing that you're not forced to kind of do that thing, that you can always say, look, like, forget it, this is not working. This actually frees you up to do much better work, I think.
That talk by Christoph Niemann, it just sounded so right to me. And not only that, he was a credible source. Like, he's doing it too, right? So I thought it was worth a try, and I did it, and I am so glad that I did. What it afforded me was an opportunity to turn down higher paying job offers to work on projects that I truly, truly believed in and with people that I really respected. And all the while, we did this while we were expecting our first kid and we were on a single income in the Boston area. And it was an amazing experience. Not only that, it also afforded us a chance to experiment to see if one of us wanted to quit their jobs for the long term to stay with the kids longer, and other big decisions like that. Basically, this category allowed us to reduce the distraction of money in our decision making, and it was so freeing, which is why we keep doing it. In the same vein, the next group of budget items is called Predictable Worries Fund, and it is exactly the way it sounds. So anything that you could reasonably foresee happening in the future that will probably stress you out or worry you, why not just slowly build towards it? But the point here isn't to actually get it right and estimate all these things with exact precision. I actually don't think you could do that. The point here really is to develop a habit of putting a little bit of money aside each month towards those things. So your future self will stress less and worry less. For example, who knows if my kids will actually go to college the way we understand college today? but I am pretty certain they're going to do some sort of education, so we put some money aside each month towards that in a tax-deductible account that gains some interest. Another example is our car. We know that we'll have to make some major fixes on our car in the future, and maybe even replace it. So we put some money aside each month towards those things. And the plan is, or the hope is, that when it comes time to actually do these things, the money will be there. Or at the very least, it'll be less of a financial burden because you've been sort of planning for it. And again, the point isn't to get it right. The point is to develop a habit of doing this, and your future self will thank you for it. So there it is. That's exactly how I start my budget every single time. Before I think about any other category, before rent, utilities, and even food, and definitely before the fun stuff that I either want to have or experience, I put money in emotionally healthy investments. And I did this even when I was in debt, and it was a way to build towards a lifestyle and not just save up for the next thing to buy. Honestly, in the beginning, it took work. It took some discipline. Let me put that into perspective. Here's me, my wife, and we just had our first kid. I'm bringing in a whopping entry-level designer salary. We decided to stay on a single income to try out spending more time with our kids, but we live in the Boston area where the cost of living is expensive. In order to stay committed to the things that were important to us via our budget, in faith, we made sacrifices for the long haul. We almost always cooked at home. My wife and kid took public transportation to most places, while I was using the car for work. We almost never bought anything new. We said no to buying a home for the foreseeable future, and we had to say no to a lot of travel. But over time, what we were able to do was put more money in all the other categories. And because all the important stuff was already taken care of in emotionally healthy investments, rest of the money really felt like guilt-free spending. So lattes every day if we wanted to. We could eat out whenever. And impulse buys were more than okay. That is to say, I developed an overall mentally and emotionally free, overall just joyful relationship with money. And I want the same for you. So give it a try.